Welcome. I'm so glad you're here today because what we're about to discuss could quite literally save your life or the life of someone you love. We're going to talk about strokes, but not in the way you've heard before. We're going to uncover truths that doctors wish every senior knew. Truths that could mean the difference between a life of independence and one forever changed. Let me start by telling you about Margaret. She's 74 years old, a grandmother of 5, and someone who always prided herself on staying active and healthy. One Tuesday morning, Margaret was preparing her usual breakfast when she noticed something odd. Her left hand felt a bit numb, almost tingly, as she reached for the coffee pot. She paused, flexed her fingers a few times, and the sensation passed. She thought maybe she'd slept on her arm funny. Later that afternoon, she felt slightly dizzy while watering her garden, but it lasted only a minute or two. Again she brushed it off. After all, she was 74. Isn't this just part of getting older? 3 days later, Margaret woke up unable to move the entire left side of her body. She'd had a stroke. But here's what haunts her family the most. Those tingling fingers and that brief dizziness weren't random. They were her brain crying out for help, sending distress signals that went unheard. Margaret didn't know that strokes rarely arrive without warning. She didn't know that what she experienced were mini-strokes, medical emergencies in their own right, and that if she'd gone to the hospital after that first episode of numbness, her major stroke could likely have been prevented entirely. Margaret's story isn't unique. It happens thousands of times every single day across this country. Seniors experience warning signs, dismiss them as normal aging, and then suffer devastating strokes that steal their independence, their memories, their ability to speak or walk or care for themselves. But it doesn't have to be this way. The tragedy isn't the stroke itself. The tragedy is that we've been taught the wrong things about strokes for far too long. Today, I want to share wisdom from two extraordinary physicians who've dedicated their lives to understanding how we can live longer, healthier, and stronger. Dr. Howard Tucker is a neurologist and one of the world's leading experts on longevity and brain health. His mentor, Dr. Shigaki Hinohara, was a legendary Japanese physician who practiced medicine until he was 105 years old. Together, their insights have helped countless people not only survive strokes, but prevent them entirely and recover in ways that were once thought impossible. So let's begin by shattering some myths, because what you don't know about strokes could cost you everything. The first myth is one that nearly cost Margaret her independence. The belief that strokes strike suddenly, without warning, like a lightning bolt from a clear sky. This is perhaps the most dangerous misconception out there. The truth is that strokes rarely happen without sending advance signals. Your brain is incredibly intelligent. When blood flow is compromised, when vessels are narrowing or becoming unstable, your brain sounds an alarm. These alarms come in the form of what doctors call transient ischemic attacks, or TIAs, commonly known as mini-strokes. A mini-stroke might feel like sudden weakness in an arm or leg that resolves within minutes. It might be a brief episode where you can't find your words or your vision goes blurry in one eye. It could be unexplained dizziness, a drooping face that corrects itself, or a feeling of confusion that passes. These symptoms typically last anywhere from a few minutes to a few hours, and then they disappear completely, leaving you feeling normal again. And that's exactly why they're so dangerous. Because they go away, we dismiss them. We tell ourselves it was nothing, that we're fine now, that we don't want to bother anyone or waste a doctor's time. But here's what's actually happening during a mini-stroke. A blood clot or a piece of plaque temporarily blocks blood flow to part of your brain. Your brain cells begin to suffer from lack of oxygen. Then, somehow, the blockage clears, blood flow resumes, and the symptoms vanish. Your brain has just shown you a preview of what a major stroke would look like. It's given you a gift, a chance to act before permanent damage occurs. The statistics on this are staggering. Research shows that if you experience a mini-stroke and seek medical attention within 24 hours, your risk of having a major disabling stroke drops by 70%. 70%. Let me say that again because it's so important. If you recognize the warning signs and get help immediately, you can reduce your risk of permanent disability by 70%. That's not a small number. That's the difference between walking into a hospital and being wheeled out in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. So what are these warning signs you need to watch for? Sudden numbness or weakness in your face, arm or leg, especially on one side of your body. Sudden confusion, trouble speaking, or difficulty understanding what others are saying. Sudden trouble seeing in one or both eyes, or double vision. Sudden trouble walking, dizziness or loss of balance and coordination, and sudden severe headache with no known cause. Even if these symptoms last only a few minutes, even if they completely resolve, you must treat them as a medical emergency. Call for help. Go to the emergency room. Do not wait to see if it happens again. Do not convince yourself it was nothing. The second myth we need to shatter is that high blood pressure is the only cause of strokes. Now, don't misunderstand me. High blood pressure is absolutely a major risk factor for stroke. It damages blood vessels over time, making them stiff and narrow. But many people who have strokes have normal or even low blood pressure. How can this be? The answer lies in understanding that strokes aren't just about pressure. They're about blood flow, about the health and integrity of your blood vessels, and about what's happening inside those vessels at a microscopic level. Think of your blood vessels like a river system. High blood pressure is like a flood, too much force crashing against the riverbanks, eroding and damaging them. But there are other threats to this river system that have nothing to do with the volume or force of water. Silent inflammation is one of these threats. Inflammation inside your blood vessels creates rough, sticky patches on what should be smooth walls. These patches attract cholesterol and other debris, forming plaques that narrow the passage and create turbulence in blood flow. This inflammation can be caused by poor diet, chronic stress, lack of sleep, smoking, or conditions like diabetes. Your blood pressure reading might be perfect, but if inflammation is quietly damaging your pito vessels, you're still at significant risk. Dehydration is another hidden danger, especially for seniors. As we age, our sense of thirst diminishes. Many older adults are chronically dehydrated without realizing it. When you're dehydrated, your blood becomes thicker, more viscous, like syrup instead of water. This thick blood is more likely to form clots and less able to flow smoothly through narrow vessels. You could have normal blood pressure but be at high risk for stroke simply because you're not drinking enough water throughout the day. High blood sugar is yet another culprit. Even if you don't have full-blown diabetes, elevated blood sugar damages the delicate lining of blood vessels, creating microscopic injuries that lead to plaque buildup and clot formation. This process happens silently over years, and your blood pressure might never reveal it. So, what does this mean for prevention? It means that preventing strokes requires more than just taking blood pressure medication and checking your numbers at the pharmacy. It requires nourishing your blood vessels from the inside out. It means staying hydrated by sipping water regularly throughout the day, aiming for at least 6 to 8 glasses. It means eating foods rich in antioxidants like berries, leafy greens, and colorful vegetables that fight inflammation. It means including omega-3 fatty acids from fish, walnuts, or flax seeds to keep blood vessel walls flexible and smooth. It means managing stress through deep breathing, gentle movement, or activities that bring you joy and calm. It means getting consistent quality sleep so your body can repair and regenerate blood vessels overnight. Prevention isn't about control and restriction. It's about cooperation with your body, about creating the conditions for smooth, peaceful blood flow. The third myth is perhaps the most heartbreaking because it robs people of hope. It's the belief that stroke recovery stops after 6 months, that whatever function you haven't regained by that point is lost forever. This belief causes countless stroke survivors to give up on therapy, to stop trying, to accept limitations that aren't actually permanent. The truth is that your brain has an extraordinary ability called neuroplasticity. This is your brain's power to rewire itself, to form new connections, to find alternate pathways when old ones are damaged. And this ability doesn't have an expiration date. Your brain continues to adapt and heal well into your 70s, 80s and beyond. Yes, it's true that the first 3 to 6 months after a stroke are when you see the most rapid improvements. This is when the initial swelling subsides and when damaged but not destroyed brain cells begin to recover. But after that window closes, something else begins, something called silent rewiring. This is when your brain quietly, persistently works to create new neural pathways around the damaged areas. This process continues for years, even decades, as long as you continue to challenge your brain with purposeful activity. Dr. Hinohara, who lived and worked until 105, used to say that the brain is like a garden. In the first months after a stroke, you're clearing away the debris from a storm. But the real cultivation, the real growth, happens slowly over seasons and years of patient, consistent care. He saw patients in their 90s who continued to regain function they'd lost years earlier because they never stopped engaging their brains and bodies in meaningful ways. The key word here is meaningful. Rote exercises, repetitive movements done without thought or emotion, have limited benefit. But activities that engage you emotionally, that connect to your identity and interests, that require problem-solving and adaptation, these activities supercharge neuroplasticity. If you loved to cook before your stroke, work on cooking again, even if you have to adapt the methods. If you loved music, engage with music, whether that's listening, singing, or playing an instrument with your functional hand. If you enjoyed gardening, find ways to garden again, even if it's tending to potted plants from a chair. Recovery is not a timeline with a finish line, it's a relationship with your brain that lasts your entire life. And every day you engage meaningfully with the world, you're telling your brain to keep healing, keep adapting, keep growing. The fourth myth we must address is that stroke damage is purely physical. When we think of strokes, we picture paralyzed limbs, slurred speech, difficulty walking. These physical challenges are real and significant. But what often goes unrecognized and untreated are the emotional and cognitive effects of stroke. Nearly 40% of stroke survivors experience depression, not just sadness, but deep, clinical depression that saps motivation and makes rehabilitation feel impossible. Anxiety is also extremely common, with survivors feeling fearful, overwhelmed, or panicked, especially about having another stroke. Some people experience emotional volatility, sudden crying or laughing without apparent reason, or irritability and frustration that strain relationships with loved ones. Cognitive changes are equally challenging. You might have trouble concentrating, find it hard to make decisions, or struggle to follow conversations in noisy environments. Your processing speed might be slower, making you feel like you're always a step behind. Memory problems can make you forget appointments, repeat questions, or lose track of time. These invisible challenges are just as real as a paralyzed arm, and they require just as much attention and compassion in recovery. The brain regions that regulate emotion and cognition are fed by the same blood vessels that supply motor areas. When stroke damages these regions, it changes not just what you can do physically, but who you feel like emotionally and mentally. Healing these invisible wounds requires a different approach. It requires rhythm and routine because predictability helps an injured brain feel safe and conserve energy for healing. It requires social connection because isolation deepens depression and anxiety, while meaningful relationships stimulate brain regions involved in emotional regulation. It requires music, which has a unique power to access emotions and memories even when language is impaired. It requires patience from caregivers and family who understand that irritability or forgetfulness isn't a character flaw but a symptom of injury. And it requires professional support from counselors or therapists who specialize in post-stroke emotional recovery. If you or someone you love is recovering from a stroke, please don't ignore the emotional and cognitive dimensions. They're not weakness. They're not something to just push through. They're real neurological consequences that deserve real care and support. Now, let's address the final and perhaps most damaging myth, that strokes after 60 are inevitable. Just part of the natural aging process, something we should expect and accept. This fatalistic view stops people from taking prevention seriously. After all, if strokes are inevitable, why bother with lifestyle changes? But here's the liberating truth. Age itself does not cause strokes. What causes strokes are damaged, inflamed, narrowed blood vessels and disrupted blood flow. Yes, these problems become more common with age, but they're not caused by age. They're caused by decades of accumulated lifestyle factors: inflammation, oxidative stress, poor nutrition, chronic stress, lack of movement, and inadequate sleep. And that means they can be addressed and reversed at any age. In fact, being over 60 gives you certain advantages in stroke prevention. You have wisdom. You know your body. You can recognize subtle changes and signals that younger people might miss. You have the time and often the motivation to prioritize your health in ways you couldn't when you were juggling careers and raising families. You have decades of experience in understanding what makes you feel good and what doesn't. Dr. Tucker, who continues to practice neurology in his 90s, often says that aging is not about decline, it's about optimization. It's about working with your body's changing needs rather than against them. For stroke prevention after 60, this means focusing on vascular health through simple, sustainable habits. Stay hydrated by keeping water with you and sipping throughout the day. Move your body gently and regularly, whether that's walking, stretching, swimming, or dancing, because movement keeps blood flowing smoothly and vessels flexible. Eat a diet rich in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, fish, nuts, and healthy fats, foods that nourish blood vessels and reduce inflammation. Manage your stress through whatever brings you peace, whether that's prayer, meditation, time in nature, or connection with loved ones. Get consistent sleep, because sleep is when your body repairs blood vessels and clears metabolic waste from your brain. Stay socially connected because loneliness and isolation increase inflammation and stroke risk. And monitor not just your blood pressure but your overall vascular health with your doctor, including cholesterol, blood sugar, and markers of inflammation. These aren't restrictions or punishments. They're gifts you give to your body, ways of saying thank you for carrying you this far, and I want to take care of you for many more years. Let me return to Margaret's story because there's a beautiful ending you need to hear. After her stroke, Margaret spent weeks in rehabilitation. She worked with physical therapists to regain movement in her left side, with speech therapists to rebuild her language skills, and with occupational therapists to relearn daily tasks. Progress was slow and often frustrating. There were days she wanted to give up, days when she wondered if she'd ever to feel like herself again. But Margaret had something powerful working in her favor. She had hope, and she had knowledge. Her doctors explained neuroplasticity to her. They told her that her brain was capable of healing for years to come if she kept challenging it. They helped her understand that her emotional struggles, the crying spells and frustration, were normal parts of stroke recovery, not signs of weakness. Margaret started small. She practiced picking up beans with her left hand. She sang songs with her grandchildren to rebuild her speech fluency. She walked in her garden every day, first with a walker, then with a cane, then on her own. She joined a stroke support group where she found others who understood what she was going through. And slowly, gradually, over months and then years, Margaret rebuilt her life. Today, 3 years after her stroke, Margaret still has some weakness on her left side. Her handwriting isn't quite what it used to be, and she gets tired more easily. But she lives independently. She cooks, she gardens, she babysits her grandchildren, and she travels to visit family. More importantly, she's become an advocate for stroke awareness. She tells everyone she meets about those early warning signs she ignored. She teaches others what mini-strokes feel like and why you must never dismiss them. Margaret's greatest gift to the world isn't her recovery, it's her message. Strokes don't have to be the end of your story. They can be the beginning of a new chapter, one written with greater awareness, deeper appreciation, and renewed commitment to health. So here's what I want you to take away from today. Strokes are not sudden, unpredictable disasters. They send warning signals that you must learn to recognize and never ignore. Strokes are not just about high blood pressure. They're about overall vascular health, which you can influence through hydration, nutrition, movement, and stress management. Stroke recovery doesn't stop after 6 months. Your brain can heal and adapt for years, even decades, if you continue to challenge it with meaningful activity. Stroke damage isn't just physical. It affects your emotions and thinking too, and these invisible wounds deserve compassionate care. And finally, strokes after 60 are not inevitable. Age brings wisdom and opportunity for prevention through lifestyle choices that nourish your blood vessels and keep blood flowing smoothly. Knowledge is power, but only if you act on it. So, I'm asking you to do 3 things today. First, learn the warning signs of mini-strokes and commit to treating any suspicious symptom as an emergency. Second, choose one action to improve your vascular health this week, whether that's drinking more water, adding a vegetable to your meals, taking a daily walk, or practicing 5 minutes of deep breathing. Start small, but start today. And third, share this information with someone you love. Talk to your spouse, your siblings, your friends about stroke warning signs. You could save a life simply